Okay, guys, welcome to the first Sales Architect podcast. Today I have Theo Gibbons, who is the marketing manager, and I would say personally all round tool and software guru over at Context. And I've brought him on today as the first guest because we've got a great personal working relationship. We've worked together in the past. We've got similar views, so hopefully we'll be quite agreeable. And generally speaking, Theo's got a wealth of knowledge on marketing, sales, and project management tools. So, welcome, Theo. How are you?
Very well, thanks, Tom. What a great
Good.
intro. I
Thank you.
don't know that I'd call myself the guru, but I'll settle for all-round product sort of geek and nerd.
Okay, well, that's
Yeah,
halfway there. There's the only
yeah,
difference between a geek and a guru is time spent.
yeah.
So maybe you could give us a bit of background, or let me introduce how we know each other first of all, and then maybe you could give us a bit of background into what you do and what Context does. So Theo and I used to work together at Context World, which is a market research company, but Theo can talk a little bit more about that in a second. And we were tag teaming on trying to get a new CRM implemented some time ago there, which we can talk about later. I left Context about 2 years ago. Theo's still there, and he's now the marketing manager. And so I'm just keen to learn from you today. What have you guys done in those last 2 years? Has it been successful? What other tools have you implemented? How have you managed that integration and getting everyone on board and trained up and all of those good things? But we'll cover that in a sec. So, do you want to maybe introduce yourself and Context and what Context does?
Sure. So, hello everyone. Yes, so as Tom said, name's Theo Gibbons, marketing manager at Context, and we really specialize in tracking the distribution technology market. So we have panels of distributors throughout the world who pool their data with us. I think this gives us a rich source of insight which we can use to package up services and research for the big tech companies.
And your role within that as the marketing manager, what type of marketing activities are you kind of leading with at the moment?
So the short version is, given the nature of our industry, we do a lot of very highly targeted account-based marketing. So anything we can do to support our business developers out in the field. And obviously, there's given the nature of our service, there's a lot of content we generate and share with our industry partners and our clients. So we have webinar series, blogs, etc., which we maintain on an ongoing basis.
Sure. And I'd highly recommend, if you're in the tech industry, checking those out because the blog in particular is quite insightful. You guys have got a team of at least half a dozen analysts that specialize in different areas within the tech industry, and therefore the insight there is really deep. And coupled with all of that, that data that you have, which is unique to Context, it gives you a really interesting take on what's going on in the tech industry, particularly in distribution. Cool, thanks for that. So I guess to kick off, both of us love technology, generally speaking, especially as it pertains to how it can be deployed into businesses, how businesses can be made more efficient, can be optimized through the use of these technologies. So as I said earlier, we met through a process of trying to get a new CRM, or we worked together more closely. We met prior to that, but we worked together more closely trying to get a new CRM system implemented. So can you tell us a little bit around, first of all, what you ended up going with, and then since I left, it was around about the time that I left that was implemented. It's been a couple of years since then. So what's happened since then, and how is that system developed? How is it used today, and what are the benefits of having a good CRM system in place?
The reason why we went for HubSpot in the end was just the thing that sort of swayed me and convinced me that I wanted to convince other people internally
Yeah.
was number one, that they made it very easy to get access to it so we could get used to it,
Mhm.
but also just how beautifully simple the user interface. was, and that was like the main pain point at Context, was just like we had very patchy uptake,
Hmm.
and no coordination between marketing, sales, and customer assurance.
Hmm.
Um, so that was the main thing I was looking for, and something that could meet the needs of those quite different groups of people who nonetheless had uh, a role to play in interacting with our partners and clients.
Hmm.
Um,
Exactly. So from my experience, having worked there for a few years, more in a kind of sales or business development type role, particularly towards the end, and prior to that in product management, a lot of things were done through spreadsheets, as is the case with many businesses still to this
yeah,
day. But particularly 4 or 5 years ago, before you know cloud-based SaaS CRM platforms were readily available, and really the only options that you had were the legacy systems like Salesforce, Microsoft Dynamics, you know, a whole pile of dead CRMs that have been left far behind in the memory nowadays. Or yeah, doing it manually through spreadsheets and trying to pull projects together and client contact together through emails and chat, IM chat. Um, so yeah, that was definitely a pain point for us in the sales department as well there, and is the case in almost every business that I speak to as a consultant as well, that hasn't kind of upgraded their system to a CRM. Okay, so what do you think? What are the key things that have now changed then, looking back on those as being the pain points? Have you seen particular optimizations in the sales, the customer success, the marketing, interaction with clients and prospects?
yeah. So the good news is that at least in terms of the core user groups which we had uh, in mind when we initially adopted the tool, the good news is that we've had uh, really good adoption. Like there's because, just to be clear, that on previous tools, some teams just were not using the official system, and we had informational silos. We had people with their sort of private address books that, say if they left, just would be completely lost. So like that. So that's now changed, and we've got that sort of core CRM discipline with the most directly sort of client engaged teams are now all working within one place. And obviously, there's a, a long term it's a long term effort to get additional value out of that fact. It's just great that we're all using a modern system. I think there's always more you can do to uh, get value
Mm.
out of the fact they're all using the same CRM, and that takes a bit more sort of creative, strategic thinking, because there's just like the initial admin challenge and training challenge of configuring the system, make sure everyone understands how it works, and it's mapped to their requirements, and that they're using it consistently, etc. There's just that process, and you can get lost in the weeds a bit,
Mm.
um, which
How
is why having engagement from the team leaders and the relevant execs is so critical, because they are thinking in that way.
mm.
Um,
So that was going to be my follow-up question. How, and this can be not specific to context, obviously, but in general, have you got any kind of tips for how to get that engagement from the various different teams that need to be not just using the system, but also inputting on how to implement it in the right way for them so that they can use it to its fullest potential? You mentioned kind of getting those champions and those team leaders in place. Was there anything else that proved particularly successful over the last couple of years in bringing all of those teams into the fold?
I mean, the product itself did a lot. So we went with HubSpot because the user interface and also was excellent. Also, they just did a better job, as far as I'm aware, of explaining what they did and how they did it. Because I tried to look at Salesforce, obviously, as in many ways was considered to be the market leader, but I couldn't just quickly get a handle on what they did or how they did it. And I went on the HubSpot website, and it just so beautifully, seamlessly explained that they had targeted tools for the three teams who I was trying to get on board. So that made it easier to sit down with the relevant stakeholders and say, look, this is what it looks like. This is how it works. This is why it would be beneficial. And in terms of tips, the key is to first work out what kind of a person you're talking to. Some people are some early adopters, really keen on new tools, or already have some insight into what's possible using modern systems. So we have some people who'd come from companies where CRM was already firmly established as the way of running a modern sales team, for example. So that makes it very, very easy to get them on board. Anyone who's still used to using their private little Excel spreadsheet, or has got their own system, that takes some explaining, takes some convincing.
So what were the main systems that were kind of spreadsheet based that were then reformatted or restructured to become CRM compliant? So for example, something like a sales pipeline can be managed through a spreadsheet quite effectively, but with many hours of formula building and lost data and all of those kind of issues. I mean, I know that was one of them because I was in that team as we were going through that transition. But is there anything else beyond pipeline, or maybe you can comment a bit more on pipeline efficiency that's been HubSpotized, if you like, and now is more efficient?
Yeah, so I think the pipeline story is quite interesting because we still partly use a Google spreadsheet to handle it. But what's changed is that HubSpot has become the data entry place where everything is entered, and you can control how things are entered in much more effectively, because different properties only function a specific way. A date property can only work in one way. Drop down select can only work in one sort of way. So whereas before we had all sorts of people copying, duplicating rows and displacing things, or entering things in a different format from other ones, which is just creating it's just obviously dysfunctional. What we now have is, in the place where you're tracking your deal, is also a place where you also input all the most relevant information that then needs to feed into the more complex back-end pipeline calculations. Obviously, there's a huge amount you can do within HubSpot, but for our requirements, using something called GAcon, which is integration between Google Sheets and HubSpot, you can set up really tight integrations where you can daily or hourly, whatever you need, export all the information you need, be it on tickets or deals or contacts or companies, whatever you need, you can export whenever you need. So we have that, just pulling that clean data, which is just standardized and can't be messed up, and that refreshes our sort of more complex backend Google spreadsheet process, which we weren't ready to change just yet.
Got you. No, I mean, it takes time for these things to become fully adopted, and then to transfer across from a legacy system to a new system.
But also, it's still the case that spreadsheets will offer just pure flexibility in terms of being able to calculate anything you want. HubSpot won't let you. It doesn't enable you to do complex formulas to work out different things. Like if you integrate it with Google Spreadsheet, you can export whatever information you need, apply any complex formula which you want to get essentially anything you can work with a formula, and then you can use GAcon to re-upload any information you want back into HubSpot.
Got you. Sure.
Lots
I
of
mean, and as an organization, I guess that's deeply interwoven with data and how data works, it's always critical to be able to have that raw format of data that you can manipulate in whatever
Yeah,
fashion. So was there a particular lack of functionality? I mean, I advocate HubSpot. Obviously, you do as well.
yeah,
I'm a reseller partner of HubSpot, but I like to understand, what the downfalls are of the systems that I recommend as well. So, was there a particular type of analysis that you couldn't conduct in HubSpot? Some kind of dashboard that you were looking to generate on a weekly basis that you just couldn't achieve through the standard analytics package in that system?
I think it's partly a limitation of HubSpot, just in terms of not being able to run formulas. And this is something I'm seeing actually appearing in a lot of other SaaS tools. So like I've used ClickUp and Coda, and a lot of these tools now are adding formulas as a property type where you can run complex formulas. But the calculated properties in HubSpot, from what I've seen, are still relatively basic. It's add, multiply, divide, but you can't take a date property uh, and just change that into, well, give me the year,
Yeah,
give me the year month. So anything like that, um, not currently feasible in HubSpot, but also just the case that we had our own very, very specific um, complex setup and no appetite to just change it all up.
sure. Yeah.
But so it was great that we could do some stuff in HubSpot and then maintain what we already had. But I'm convinced that for people with simpler requirements, you can probably do most things within HubSpot.
Yeah. I think it's also to do with the point in your development as a commercial business at which you integrate a system like HubSpot or Pipedrive or whatever CRM system. Typically the sooner you do that, the more you base your process, your systematization
Right,
of
exactly. So yeah,
processes
that's
on
yeah. I
that.
think I think I think that's a key point. We came in at it having already spent years anchoring ourselves in a sort of complex web of Google spreadsheets that all read off each other. So it wasn't just a pipeline; it's just all the other systems that read off it.
Exactly.
Whereas if you're just starting out in your journey, then I think you build something from the ground up in HubSpot or with the integrations.
Sure. So moving away from CRM then, what other kind of systems do you use? I tend to use the phrase CRM plus, so all of these kind of
Yeah,
peripheral systems that sit around a CRM that enable you to do things like sales outreach, inbound marketing, events management, ticketing, all that
yeah,
kind
yeah.
of project management, etc. So, what kind of modern tools? You mentioned ClickUp a second ago. What other kind of modern tools are you using nowadays, and are they integrated back into the
Yeah.
CRM to some effect as well?
Yes, that's a good question because actually, when we were, I didn't mention it earlier on, but yeah, one of the evaluation criteria I had in mind when looking at different tools is, well, how well does it integrate with everything uh, out there? Because no matter how fully featured HubSpot is aiming to be, it does have a focus, and there are all sorts of other things that we need to achieve that do require specialized tools, like, for instance, project management, webinars, and stuff like that. And it really did appear that HubSpot itself had a very big focus on building strong, true integrations with other tools out there, and we can get into what I mean by true integrations a bit later.
Mm-hmm.
But it also seemed like it had the scale and the ambition to interface with everything out there.
Yeah.
Uh, and I didn't with a lot of the smaller platforms out there. I didn't necessarily see that. I just saw a lot of things saying, "Hey, we integrate with thousands of other tools via Zapier," And Zapier is it's cool, but it's not an out of the box solution. It can be quite complex to set up, and is tricky to do bi-directional
Yes.
synchronization. And that's what I mean by like a true integration. Like it's something like where you get like a deep integration that means that information flows back and forth between systems, which more often than not is what you need.
Yeah.
Uh,
Definitely. Yeah, I know what you mean by a true integration, as in, I can do an action in system A, which pushes a flag through to system B to conduct another action, which then in turn will go off and do a whole bunch of automated updating, which requires no human input, which previously may have required a lot of human input.
yeah,
And then it sends a third flag back across to the initial system to update that initial
yeah,
field again.
exactly.
That's the kind of bi-directional and more complex integration that you need to be able to do things like, pathing tickets through to the right team, and then once the team has dealt with that ticket, pathing it back through to the correct customer and the correct customer's manager,
Yeah,
account
exactly.
manager. Exactly. Okay. So you
So
mentioned Zapier. Is that something that you toyed with at one point and then decided actually we'd rather go with native?
so it's not really that I decided against Zapier. Now, I tried it out. I really like it. It's great for a few things I run in the background on the tools I use. It was more just that I will always favor an off-the-shelf integration, which is natively available within a tool. So, for instance, we've just started to use a webinar platform called BigMarker.
Hmm.
Um, One of the things which we're on the lookout for was needs to integrate with HubSpot, um, which obviously they do, and most tools do because they have an incentive to integrate with one of the biggest CRM platforms there, and it just works so well. All I had to do was just add in the API key, refresh it, and I could point to specific lists within HubSpot in each direction, and so I could very quickly register my, create a registration form within HubSpot, send out my marketing campaign, and automatically have all those people who are populated in HubSpot also be populated within BigMarker. And at the same time, I can point the people populated BigMarker back to a list in HubSpot, also synchronizing in their unique joining link
Hmm.
so that I can actually do all the communications within HubSpot because I can share that with them. And, that's, I'm sort of used to that now as functionality. I expect that as functionality. But, a few years ago, I would have been spending my whole time uh, downloading refreshed lists of registrants from a Google spreadsheet linked to a Google form and uploading them again to the system, which would then do all the emails, but and of which I had zero visibility over who was opening or clicking on whatever, whether no visibility on whether they got them or not. So that's the sort of
Yeah.
thing where a real, true two-way integration just adds a lot of value and saves a lot of time.
So it'd be interesting if we can to try and explore the concept of time saving a bit more.
Mm.
So you mentioned, being able to make sure that you've got the right targeted list, being able to track the sending, the receiving, who's picking it up, who's clicking through. All of that stuff is kind of peripheral. It's nice to have. Um, but the fact that you know that the right list of people is getting that invite is the core thing. How much time do you think you were spending previously? I mean, I don't know how often you do webinars these days, but let's say you do one once a month or something. How many hours do you think you were saving um, per webinar overall through this system?
So I think once you've set it up, you're saving. It depends. Like in the lead up to a webinar when there are lots of people registering on a daily basis, you wouldn't want to make them wait. So every day, just be spending 10 minutes downloading, re-uploading. But it's over and above the just the specific time. If you add it all together, it doesn't seem necessarily like that much. But it's just the headspace it takes up. It's one more thing you need to either keep in your head or have on a checklist, or it's one more thing you need to delegate to someone and make sure it's happening. So it's just releasing headspace for other more important things. I think that's where I see the value in sort of automations and integrations. It's you save time, but not so you can do other boring things, but more so you have more time to focus on the strategy, on the quality of the content and the stuff which is just more interesting and engaging and better designed for humans to do.
Yeah, exactly. It's that concept of opportunity cost, right? You have 1 hour available to you, what could you do with it? In the ideal world, you're obviously going to choose the thing that's going to return the highest value. If you're a salesperson, that hour is probably best spent doing a couple of pitches or demos to clients. If you're a marketing manager, it's best spent coming up with the concept for your next webinar rather than administrating the current webinar that's about to happen next. So in terms of like looking to the future, obviously, like we've discussed, you're into keeping an eye on tools. You're interested in the technology that's coming up in the future. Is there anything that you've seen recently that you're keeping an eye on, either for the use within context or just generally you think, wow, that's a great tool that's going to save a lot of people a lot of time, or it's going to unlock a whole load of potential in some type of business? Have you seen anything like that? Have you got any recommendations for things to keep an eye on?
Yeah, I'd say the two tools which are really on my radar at the moment are ClickUp, project management tool, and Coda, which I'm not going to call a project management tool because it seems a bit more sort of generic than that. But both of them actually are doing something I find is quite interesting, which is they don't come with a sort of like a predefined use case. They're both in very, very different ways, building out loads of features that are available to you. So just just a few clicks away, you can sort of call up, and using those, you can build your own sort of business process or project tracker, or and so whereas previously I get a sense that in the SaaS space is very much there's a very specific use case for which you would design a tool, and I feel like those companies are going to have to start keeping an eye on their back, because it seems like there's some tools coming out which it's essentially like it's the final step in the evolution away from low code environments where you just have an environment within which you've got a whole bunch of functionality at your fingertips, and you can just build your own business process. So yeah, I realize I've just blathered without actually telling you anything about the tools themselves, but Coda, it's kind of like a mishmash between. It's like they've taken the best of Google Docs and Google Sheets and added loads of integrations. So again, it's this emphasis on integrating, on being able to pull in data and action, and push back actions externally with all the major tools out there. And I encourage you just to play. Just if you're used to Google Spreadsheets and or Excel, I'd encourage anyone to do the Coda tutorials, just to see. It's just really interesting to see how people have taken this taken what's been around for ages and sort of given a fresh spin on how to use data tables, essentially.
Yeah.
Like very, very creative stuff, making it a lot more interactive, a lot more user friendly. So yeah, I'd encourage them to take a look at that. Yeah, and the other one is ClickUp, which is my current favorite project management tool.
Mm-hmm.
They're just hugely ambitious and building a really brilliant product incredibly quickly, adding new features every single week, and with an excellent free entry level tier to try it out. So yeah, I recommend that to anyone who needs team management, task management, project management. And again, it's this thing of it's not prescriptive in terms of what precise kind of project management you need to do. It just comes with a whole bunch of functionality so that you can and very easy ways to configure how you visualize your information, so you can build basically. It's very likely you'll be able to build anything you need. So, for instance, we had an HR application tracker system, which used to involve um, getting applications in a Google form or in lots of different separate silos, and then we'd have to centralize them in a Google spreadsheet and put their CVs in a Google Drive folder, and the whole thing was a bit of a mess. And in ClickUp, you just create a list, create a form at the click of a button, link to that list. You add all the properties which you want people to fill in, first name, last name, location, CV, and you can then just send that form out all over the place. People fill it in, and you just all of a sudden you've got all your applications coming into one centralized location. I think that's kind of an example of something which might previously have been a specific app that someone would have built for the specific purpose of application tracking.
Yeah.
But there's actually no need for a separate app when you've got all the underlying functionality can be made available.
Yeah, I think this concept of what I call like a blank canvas application, basically, it's just pure architecture. It's just building blocks upon which you can do literally anything. I think like the term task management is probably the best way to describe them, because by definition a task can be literally anything, anything that a person does or a system does automatically. And yeah, no, you're right, like combining off the shelf applications that do specific things with kind of semi open systems like HubSpot, which has at the core of it prescriptive activity, but also has some kind of at the periphery can do some things through integrations and through some of the more malleable activity. And then you've got these completely blank canvas. You literally, like the first time that you open monday.com or ClickUp or something like that, you're literally presented with a blank, effectively a blank spreadsheet, right? Of what do you want your columns to be called, what do you want your rows to be called, and then you go from there and you end up building something.
You build it up,
and by combining those three types of tools, really most businesses that are doing any kind of commercial activity in sales, marketing, customer success, and project management can probably do, if they design their entire architecture to be built on these systems, they probably only need half a dozen pieces of technology that are well integrated with each other to be able to do their entire commercial business activity. And that kind of fascinates me. I know it fascinates you as well, being able to build that really simplistic interaction between them to achieve the best results. Okay, well let's.
And I think it's still very much a challenge, because it's usually the case that some things integrate very well with one, but then not the other. It's still like it's still like a bit of a puzzle where not everything necessarily fits. But it's I think there's definitely a positive direction for the industry as a whole towards, like, it's definitely a differentiator now for companies to be able to integrate, which is why every single company will say, at least, that they integrate with everything else, whether or not it's a true deep integration or not. But for the ClickUp, Coda, HubSpot, I just, everywhere I look, I see like the big serious companies take like integration as something which they have to invest in, and they're all trying to build. I suppose they're all trying to build their own ecosystem of apps. They always put themselves in the picture in the center with all the other apps around them.
Yeah.
They want to be at the center, but from a business perspective, you don't have to necessarily see it that way as long as they all speak
Yeah.
together.
And you can achieve 80%, 90% of what you're trying to do through those native integrations and the kind of logical interchange between two well-established systems. And then for everything else, there's Zapier or
Yeah.
PySync, or pick your other equivalent to Zapier. So yeah,
Oh,
requires
I
more.
would. PySync definitely don't think of themselves as another Zapier.
Yeah, well, it's an
The
oversimplification maybe, but
yeah.
for sure. Okay, well, it's been really good to speak to you and catch up. We haven't seen each other for quite some time due to COVID, so hopefully we'll be able to go for a beer again sometime in the future.
That would
Who
be cool.
knows? Maybe next year.
Yeah.
Any closing remarks of resource sites that you like to go to for more information on SaaS tools? Where do you go if you say, right, today I want to build a system that does X, Y, Z? Where do you go to go and find that information? Obviously, it starts with Google, but where where do you go from Google?
So my go-to sort of platform review website is G2 Crowd. So I'm aware of all the other ones out there, like Capterra, but for some reason I keep going back to G2 Crowd. I think it's because they've got a nice visualized grid,
Yeah.
which makes it very simple for me to see on a chart where they sit, and I tend to like to, and I'll just take a cross section of whoever's highest on customer satisfaction. I'm not too worried about market presence. Obviously, that does play a big part if you're choosing, the central sort of tool in your hub of tools. Then you'd want that to be, significant, like HubSpot. But otherwise, just looking to see higher user satisfaction rates. And then just like what will typically then decide the next stage in the process is whether they've got a free access, because those are the ones which are without having to get approval from anyone.
Yeah.
I can just go sign up, open it up, and just take a poke around.
And that culture of being able to encouraging your, as a let's say a business leader is of a small to medium sized business is listening to this now, a really key part of culture is to encourage and enable people in mid-level management, or people in key strategic roles that really want to build these systems, really want to improve processes, really want to generate more revenue or get more sign-ups for the next webinar or whatever it is, to enable them to go and do that, right? Not to stop them from signing up for freebies, not to
I,
stop
I,
them from exploring their opportunities and options.
yeah, I think it's absolutely crucial. You really want everyone to feel like they've got a stake in the tools that are being used, and some degree of agency. I recognize that in any company, no matter the size, you've got to balance out two things, which is just like the end user experience and satisfaction and investment, but also from that higher up level, the coherency of the overall set of tools you're using. So, you wouldn't, if you've invested in setting yourself up with Microsoft Teams, for example, and that's all set up within your network of apps, you wouldn't want someone start bantering on about how much better Slack is. So it's you need to balance out those two things. But I think gone are the days where just be a company's IT team would just say these are the tools you're going to use and just roll it out, and that was the end of discussion. I think uh, there's just for one like there's so many new SaaS platforms out there. There's so many different use cases, so you do need the end user uh, buy-in. You do need their insight because they will understand what they need to get out of it.
Yeah, definitely. I think having that openness with some rigidity around, this is the tool that we've chosen for this in the meantime. If you've just gone through a whole selection process and then someone pipes up and says, oh, what about just as you've signed the contract for something? Oh, what about
Yeah,
this one? Obviously, that's not to be advised. But yeah, in that sourcing period where you're looking for something new, it's good to encourage people to contribute
yeah.
their
But
thoughts.
even then, if someone does pipe up, I mean, like the space, these tools are moving all so quickly that you do need on an ongoing basis to have like an open mind to the fact that one part of your toolkit may become not, if not redundant, like definitely not the best
Mm.
out there. Then
As
you need to weigh up the trade offs of switching towards something which no one's used before.
exactly.
Um, but yeah, the other thing I want to say is just the standards of user friendliness and of UX have improved so much over the past few years that I think people now have greater expectations and less tolerance um, for sort of antiquated or clunky systems. Um, so
Yeah, I always say your average employee or your average working person has become used to Amazon Prime, Netflix streaming, pick any other B2C service that's click one button and you've got everything you could ever wish for.
right,
And so
yeah,
people
yeah,
are really becoming used to that in the business world as well. They want to be
yeah,
able to do everything in one click. They want to be able to communicate with people seamlessly across multiple channels. All that stuff that you expect in your
yeah,
interactions with Amazon.
as they should, because that translates into efficiency, into sort of time saved, and into like dramatically easier rollout. Because this is like, I mean, my takeaway from our experience with rolling out HubSpot is that even with the most beautifully designed user interface, where everything has been wonderfully streamlined for ease of use, and I do consider like HubSpot to be best in class on that front. Even with all of that, it's not obvious that people will necessarily take to it without guidance, without training, without the solution being sort of sold to them in a sense. Like it, you know, for like so like a product geek like myself, like I'm like, wow, it's great, and then like so for your early adopters types, and then no problem, but it's kind of the price of entry now to have like an excellent user interface. Uh, because you still have quite a lot of work to do thereafter. Um,
And it just makes that first step, that first convincing
that
people
much
to
easier.
adopt
Yeah,
so much easier. Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Okay, well, thank you very much, Theo. Really appreciate your time. I'm sure we'll have another one of these sessions in the future where we talk about other tools and processes and systems and geek out about all of those things. But in the meantime, have a great rest of the week and speak to you again soon.
Thank you very much, Tom. Speak soon.
Cheers, Theo. Bye.
Bye.